dry tree trunk in Hirschgarten. Sun-kissed and truly loved by winter's solar power, I lean against a mighty big dry tree trunk, draw strength from the shards of nature. Drink in the grey beauty of German winter. Ghost-like trees without leaves encircle me, embrace and uphold me like long-lost ancestors. Silently eerie yet cunningly rejuvenating, cold winter wind kissed my forehead, whispers about the wisdom of hope in cyclical seasons. Everything that dies in winter resurrects with spring's growth, blossoms in glorious summer, and ripens to golden brown in autumn, only to die again in dead of winter to come. How therapeutic I find winter's shards of nature as I lean against this dry tree trunk, standing dead still in the Hirschgarten, giving me strength while I embark on exile, silently comforting me with solid grace. No branches, no leaves, no fruit, no flowers, yet restoring my strength far away from home. Who needs friendly fake humans when there's light embraces from shards of nature? Hi, my name is Stella Nyanzi. I'm a Ugandan, a dissident poet, currently in the third year of my scholarship program with Writers in Exile program of Penn, Germany. I have 3 children who are teenagers. I've been living with them here in Munich under the scholarship. And as we wind up our scholarship time, it's wonderful to give a portrait of who I am. So in addition to being a poet, in my country, I am known as the vulgar poet because I wrote poems which criticized the president of my country and his misgovernance, the corruption in our country. And I use sexually explicit language to talk about the misgovernance in the country. And so I was arrested because of these poems, charged with offensive communication and cyber harassment against the president of Uganda. And I went to jail, serving 18 months in prison because I was actually found guilty. After that, I had to flee from Uganda because my life was threatened. In addition to being a poet, I'm trained with a doctorate in medical anthropology, specializing in sexualities. I've done a lot of research around homosexualities in my country. In Uganda, as the world knows, we're the most recent country to have a law that was passed against homosexualities, and the law includes the death penalty. In 2023, the parliament of my country passed this law again. Earlier in 2014, 10 years ago, we had the same law in our country, which was repealed by the Constitutional Court of Uganda. In light of the risk that homosexual people in my country face, I have done a lot of activism based on my research as a medical anthropologist around the human dignity, the life and well-being of queer, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex people in Uganda. And currently, a knowledge producer who writes the truth about the reality that we have homosexual people in Uganda faces up to 20 years imprisonment in my country. So in addition to my activism for LGBTIQ rights, in addition to my poetry, I'm also a politician. I decided to join politics in my country, having realized that unless academics and creatives participated in changing the governance of our country, it was impossible for us to put our issues on the table. And my biggest issue has been around women's rights, children's rights, young girls' rights, and I'm particularly passionate about menstrual activism because in my country, we still have girls who miss school on days when they menstruate because they lack menstrual hygiene materials. I have spent 3 years in Germany experiencing democracy, experiencing freedom, experiencing what it's like for people to actually live even though they're different. And I think for me, that in my third year as a writer in exile scholar, part of my passion to speak the truth even when it's dangerous is inspired by the possibilities to live freely that I've experienced in Germany. I want to speak first of all as an exiled writer, that sometimes having fled from countries where our writing takes us to prison, one comes with this fear to new locations where there's freedom to write and the ability to be supported even when one is critical of the status quo. And I think that part of what inspired me from the Brechtian text is this call to courage. Courage, one must have courage. Find reservoirs of courage to write truthfully. One of the most striking points for me was the invitation by Brecht for us to not only write descriptively, but create relations around power holders. Don't just write about hunger or poverty or lack, but try to explain the relationships with the power holders who create that hunger, that lack, that oppression, such that when one knows this truth, one can therefore know how to implement change. And I think that the call to not just write truth for the sake of truth, but to write truth in ways that people can then take action became very much alive. And I thought about my own writing, how sometimes as a creative, I just write poetry for the sake of describing something beautiful. And I also reflect on ways in which people have said to me, why is your poetry so angry? Why are you so audacious when you write the way you write? And I think that for me, sometimes my poems, especially coming from home and when I was at home, had to push people to think, push people into rage or anger or fear so that they would realize if they didn't take action, then the status quo would not change.
Is this Callipolis really utopia? Isn't Plato's Callipolis dystopia? Isn't Socrates' Callipolis really dystopia? Callipolis utopia? Callipolis dystopia? Callipolis utopia dystopia? Utopia dystopia? Callipolis, 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 utopia, utopia, dystopia, utopia, 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 Callipolis, 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 dystopia, utopia, utopia, dystopia, Callipolis, 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 Callipolis,
I think that lines that struck me were around propaganda and how propaganda is important, especially if it's going to make people move. However, in terms of power relations, Brecht also tells us that those who hold power debase, or the word he uses is base. They consider truth as base. They consider propaganda as base. They consider thinking as base. And I think what I really loved and appreciated most, the punchline for me, was how he relates the powerful with negating thought among those who are ruled, those who are subject, those who are powerless. And my biggest takeaway from that text is the call to thinking. For those of us who write for change, who write for social justice, who write to move privilege to work for the underprivileged, it's important to encourage thought, because many time power holders freeze the thinking of the masses, freeze the thinking of our audiences. His call for literature to be able to impact thinking among audiences to create change is beautiful. And as I conclude, I think therefore that for me, even when I'm in Germany and there have been topics that are difficult to talk about, while I have begun silencing myself, a brilliant line in the Brechtian text was around war, where he asks us to have intelligence in how we present difficult topics. And he talks about, why is there war? And if it's difficult to ask this question, ask about how can the war be stopped? And if it's difficult to ask about how the war can be stopped, ask about the senselessness of war. And I think that currently it's very good we have a ceasefire in Gaza, because hopefully we can be able to talk about the different wars in Congo, in Sudan, in Gaza, in Ukraine, freely, following from the Brechtian call for us to write about truth.